Good afternoon, everyone. We have a few people still signing in, so we'll begin in just a moment. Okay, welcome to the September edition of our educational webinar series. My name is Chris Lewis. I'm the Vice President of EcoGreenHotel. This year our webinar series has covered a variety of topics. We've covered 179D federal tax incentive, EC motors, HCMI incentive programs, LED lighting, indoor air quality, variable frequency drives, and more. The topic for today's webinar is Hotel Carbon Measurement Initiative. In addition to educational webinars and reporting news and trends, EcoGreenHotel provides a variety of services to the hospitality industry. Our Energy Solutions team provides comprehensive energy and water analysis called E2A. Additionally, we provide project management services, energy procurement strategies, administration of 504 loans, rebate applications, and others. If you would like additional information on any of the services that we provide, please feel free to reach out to me directly. My contact information is available at the end of the presentation. We are privileged to have Fran Hughes, Head of Programs at the International Tourism Partnership, present to us today both the methodology that has been developed as well as a complementary tool to calculate the carbon footprint of an occupied room on a daily basis, as well as a meeting room. Now, it's important to note many of you have a tool that was provided by your brand, and I'm talking about LightStay, Green Toolbox, Green Engage, etc. Many of these brands, as members of ITP, were directly involved with the development of HCMI and use it as a basis for their own tool. They may or may not provide you the detail that is required on some RFPs, but the tool Fran is providing you today can. Now, before I turn the presentation over to Fran, I'd like you to direct your attention to the questions section on the dashboard. If you would like to drag that section onto your desktop, you can minimize the rest of the dashboard and feel free to type questions in during the presentation. We will address as many of these questions live today as we can, and the others we will email answers directly to you. Now, before I turn the presentation over, we're going to start out with a quick poll question. And if you'll just click on the appropriate answer, we'll get the results of this poll after a few slides. And at this time, I want to turn it over to Fran.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining the webinar. I'm hoping that this will be a very useful presentation for you. Just to introduce to you my organisation, which is the International Tourism Partnership. We're a member organisation, we're a non-profit, and our members are some of the leading global hotel companies, some of the very familiar names that you will know that maybe your property is part of. We work together uniquely on collaborative sustainability issues to provide a voice for social and environmental responsibility in the industry. And we came together with the World Travel and Tourism Council, which works largely on social and economic aspects of tourism, to develop the Hotel Carbon Initiative. So what is the Hotel Carbon Measurement Initiative? First question to answer. Quite simply, it's a methodology and a tool which will help a hotel to calculate and communicate the carbon footprint of a stay or a meeting, an event in the same way. So on the one hand, we have a methodology document which gives the narrative, the explanation as to how the footprint is calculated. And for those who need it, a tool which is an Excel-based tool, and I'll be showing you that a little bit later on. As Chris says, some hotels have their own proprietary system. It's simply a matter of checking that that system is compatible with the HCMI methodology. But if we go back to the whole sort of rationale behind HCMI, really came from the corporate customer starting to ask questions of hotels as to what the carbon footprint of a stay or a meeting was. However, the information that they were getting back could be very different. It might be calculated in one way by one hotel group. It might include different things from another. So it was comparing apples and pears. You just could not really determine, how accurate this information was or what it included. And this was why we decided to get our heads together with the World Travel and Tourism Council and our combined membership to work out what we can do. I'm just looking, Chris, have we got any of the results of the poll yet?
Yes, I'm showing the poll results now. 81% of the attendees do not know the carbon footprint of the guest room stay in their hotel. 10% did. And the other 10% want to know, well, what is a carbon footprint?
Right, okay. Well, let's start off with answering some of those questions. The carbon footprint is the total carbon emissions from the products and services that make up your offering. I'll come back to that in a little bit. Great that 10% of you are doing that. For 80% of you, don't worry, carbon footprinting is quite new, and we're hoping that by learning about this now, that we'll put you in a state of readiness to be able to calculate and report that in good time. And that sort of comes to one of my first points of the rationale behind why calculating your carbon footprint. As I said, it came from the corporate customer. The corporate customer is increasingly asking for this information in their RFP. It's increasingly becoming part of the buying decision. It's not the be-all and end-all at the moment, but I've spoken to large corporates who are using this information as a points ranking to possibly cream off some of the lower performing hotels, or rather the hotels who can't report. Do not be the hotel that can't answer the questions of your corporate customer, because the trend is only going in one direction, whether it's replying to corporate RFPs or mandatory reporting, which is coming in here in the UK. You need to be in a state of preparedness for this, and the small time invested in calculating your carbon footprint will not go amiss. There is, of course, the environmental aspect of it, and the cost savings that you'll get if you start to look at, your fuel and your energy use, identify where the hotspots are and try to reduce those. Now, HCMI is not a hotspot spotter in itself, but many hotels have started to understand their energy profile, their environmental impact from actually going through this process. They can use that information then to offset it. Please accept my apologies for this message that keeps popping up. And it's brand positioning as well, positioning your hotel. It's a great opportunity. If 80% of the audience here are not measuring their carbon footprint, well, you've got a good chance, if you're getting in, to have the edge on many of your competitors, to demonstrate that you are leading in environmental activities. The trend is only going in one direction. I can only say that's strong enough. So it's a great position to be in to be able to start using this now. And why use HCMI as opposed to any other methodology? This wasn't dreamt up by people who were remote from the industry. It was developed by the industry, hoteliers who know what it's like to operate a hotel. They know the operational issues. They know the data gathering issues. So as such, being developed by industry, it's something which we feel is very user-friendly, and it's designed specifically for hotels. It uses the metrics of the Global Business Travel Association RFP, and it was designed to be very straightforward, to not overcomplicate carbon footprinting, and to be used by any kind of hotel. So if you're a resort hotel, if you're a small B&B, if you're a big city centre hotel, any hotel can use this anywhere in the world. And as such, because it is easy and it's straightforward, we've already got over 15,000 hotels using this. So my question would be, it's not why use HCMI, but why not? I think you'd have to have a good reason to want to go outside of this huge group of hotels who are doing it. And we're very transparent in what we're trying to achieve in it. It might seem a little bit complicated at first as I take you through some of it, but I'm trying to just give you a flavour of what HCMI is about today. In practice, you might find that the average time, the time taken to complete the calculation is not that long. And it's not free. Sorry, it is free. This is not something you're going to have to pay for. It's not something that is making any profit. We've done it. We want the maximum number of hotels to use this. That's why it's free, because the more people who use it, the stronger it is. If you're familiar with the greenhouse gas protocol definition of different types of emissions, this might help clarify what the footprint includes. First of all energy and fuel used on site, so gas, oil and so forth, or your purchased electricity, your district heating and cooling. Those are what we call scopes 1 and 2. Scope 3 are emissions which are outside of your direct control, but through the products and services that you purchase in. And the only scope 3 emission that we include is laundry which is outsourced. Now, many of your properties might have laundry on site, in which case that is captured in the overall footprint from the energy use. But if you outsource laundry, we decided that you need to include that. 2 reasons. One, it's quite a big contributor to the carbon footprint. And secondly, one of the most visible activities that hotels engage in from the point of view of the customer is linen reuse programs. So to say to a customer that you're not going to include laundry might not make much sense. So we agreed that this should be included. What we don't include, though, is any of the other products and services for the hotel. So we don't include the furnishing and fittings. We don't include staff, commuting, waste. Now, some people ask us about these, but there are no globally agreed criteria for determining the emissions from these different services, and we just think it's a step too complicated. We realise that there are many emissions in the supply chain of a hotel, but the value of including those is debatable. They might be quite small, and even if they are large, they're very difficult to get information on. So we don't make any apologies about the fact that we've kept it simple. If we hadn't kept it simple, we would have far less buy-in and support and far less hotels using this. So we'd rather start getting more people measuring than to be overly complicated for no really good reason. How does it report the footprint? As I say, these are the Global Business Travel Association RFP questions. So it's carbon footprint per occupied room on a daily basis and per area of meeting space on an hourly basis, so that you can then factor that up for any individual customer. Or you can simply use that for your own internal reporting. Looking now at the methodology, I'm going to take you through fairly quickly, but to give you a flavour of what's included in the methodology and the whole approach. So we start off with the data gathering, what you're going to have to gather data on. I'll come back to this in a little bit of detail, so please forgive me if I move a little bit quickly over this. You're going to have to get some data on your property itself. So what we call standing data is what you're only going to need to get once. So you're only going to need to calculate the area of your hotel once. Other information you'll need to get on an annual basis. So you'll need to determine a reporting year and say, right, within that reporting year then, how many occupied rooms were there, what was my energy consumption, how much fuel did we use. And also, I'll come back to the supplementary questions in a minute. The data gathered then, so you've collected all the information on your fuel use, your energy source, all of your emissions. Because we report on guest nights, on occupied rooms, and also on meeting space, we apportion then the consumption or the energy consumption, or the emissions we should say, proportionately between meeting space and guest rooms. So if your hotel, for example, has 30% of its space is dedicated to a function room, 70% is dedicated to guest rooms, we will then split that accordingly between meeting rooms and guest space. We take all of the data that we've got, we convert your megawatts, your kilowatt hours, your kilojoules, your litres or gallons of gas to carbon dioxide equivalent via emissions factors, and then we apportion that to the clients. Let me take this now a little bit more step by step. This next slide shows the cover sheet of the Excel calculation tool, which is freely available alongside the methodology. So as I say, the methodology describes how to calculate the footprint and where you can go to get the data. This is where you will put the data into the sheet. Just an overview for now. It's quite easy to follow what to do because the orange boxes are to be completed by the hotel. And embedded into the spreadsheet are a variety of formula which will calculate then your carbon footprint once you've put in that data. So you'll see for a start you've got some general information about the hotel, the area of guest rooms and corridors, the area of meeting space, and so forth. You'll see you've got a section to complete for energy consumption. And then there are also some supplementary questions. We work on the assumption that everybody will use energy, electricity, gas, oil, whatever that might be. But there are some things that are applicable just to some hotels. So for example, not all hotels do outsource their laundry. Not all hotels do have AC or chillers. Certainly here in the UK it's not strictly necessary for most of the year, unfortunately. And not all hotels have transportation vehicles. So there are some questions that people only need to answer if those are applicable to them. So you see first of all the energy consumption. That is entered into the spreadsheet in kilowatt hours. You'll put in your total consumption for that year. And also then if you look to the right, you'll see CO2 emission factor. Now emission factors are used to convert energy use or fuel use into carbon dioxide equivalent. Those are available through national databases such as the US EPA, the Climate Registry, in the UK here, DEFRA, but it can be complicated looking these up. If you're familiar with emissions factors, that's great, but we realize that for many hoteliers that's just a bit of a headache. So within the methodology and the calculation tool, we have included lists of common emission factors. Emissions factors vary as to where you are in the world. So say, for example, parts of the US, you might have the majority of your electricity is generated by coal-fired power stations. In other parts of the country, it might be majority nuclear, in which case you will have a varying profile because nuclear is less carbon intensive than coal. So that's why you have to look up the most accurate emission factor that you can to really reflect the circumstances where you are. So I'm going to flick on to the next slide now. And just go back to that point about data gathering in order to complete the calculation. As I say, it's quite easy if you think about it in terms of what you need to just go out and get once. That is things that don't change, and things that you're going to need to gather on an annual basis. So the first time you perform your carbon footprint calculation, it's probably going to be a little bit more of a headache than ongoing. However, I do think it's worth the investment, small investment of time, in order to get this calculation for the rewards that you're going to be getting as an early adopter of carbon measurement, and that position that you'll have in order to reply to your corporate customers. So what information do you need once? Assuming that these don't change, probably your hotel area is not going to change unless you build on an extension. So what you need to do is to get the area of your guest rooms and the adjoining corridors. You also need to then get the area of meeting space, and you also need to get the number of rooms. Now the latter of those is probably quite easy. The former two, the area, you'll probably be able to get through floor plans of the building, and maybe the engineering department or facilities department would have something like that. On an annual basis, you need to have your occupied rooms, as I say, your fuel and energy use, from your meters if possible, rather than bills, because bills can be estimated. So it's more accurate if you go by meter readings for your allocated year. And then information on all of those additional, potentially additional sources of emissions, such as laundry, fugitive emissions, and mobile fuels. It's just those three extras on top of your fuel and energy use, and as I say, the emissions factors. In the methodology for the additional questions, and in fact for some other more tricky questions, we have what we call a decision tree, as you can see here on the screen now. Laundry is a good example, and it just helps you walk through the question and work out what is the most appropriate response for your hotel. So in the case of laundry, do you outsource it? If not, you don't need to do any additional calculations, no additional data gathering, because the emissions from the laundry are captured in your overall energy use. You've already accounted for that in your energy use. If you do outsource your laundry, some hotel suppliers, particularly the bigger ones who have their own sustainability objectives, are able to provide you with your particular share of the energy consumption. So they'll say, okay, yes, well, you purchase so much from us, and that's equivalent to however much carbon dioxide equivalent. In that case, fantastic, you can put it in. If not, it might be a little bit more tricky. This is where there's a little bit of time sometimes, when you're liaising with suppliers, but supplier dialogue is not a bad thing, to get them onto the case that you're looking at their energy profile as well and hoping that they'll up their game. If you don't know,
Fran,
yeah.
Fran, it's Chris.
Hi there.
I have a question coming in, which is a great
Yep.
question. And by the way, when you see that message again, the third option there should stop that from popping up.
Oh, really? Thank you.
Yes.
I've not seen this before. I'm just getting rid of it quite quickly, so apologies to everybody for that.
The question is about chilled water. So we have a particular property that is outsourcing their chilled water. They're getting their chilled water from a different source. Is there a different set of methodology questions to account for getting your chilled water from a third party?
That's right. We have in the methodology for chilled water and district heating and cooling.
Okay, great.
So we have same kind of decision trees, which should hopefully help answer that question.
Thank you.
That's okay. So if you do know the next way, if you don't, Thank you, and I apologise for that message. I hope it won't turn up again. So the next question, if you can't get your information from your supplier, do you know how much weight of laundry you have? Now, some people have gone to the extent they just go to a room and they bag up the linens from that room and they'll weigh it. And then they can factor up, you know, according to how many occupied rooms they've had, the approximate weight of their laundry for a year. And there is a calculation technique in the methodology to help you do that calculation. If you don't know that, or if you don't want to do that, you can just literally estimate the energy consumption from the occupancy that you have. Again, there is an estimation technique for this. So we're giving various options, and so the best practice, of course, or the best option is to be able to give, you know, exact figures where you can, but we realize that's not possible, so we do give the opportunity to estimate on the laundry. Just given the time constraint, I'm not going to go through every page of the methodology and the calculation tool, but you will find that there's a separate tab in the Excel calculation tool where you'll put in this information, and we make it very, hopefully, as straightforward as possible to do that. Another supplementary question is on mobile fuels. Now, mobile fuels is the sort of technical term for any like sort of mobile equipment. So that could be any landscaping equipment you have, or, you know, golf buggies, although I think those are sort of generally electric, or shuttle buses that you might have. Generally, mobile fuels don't account for very much unless you have transportation vehicles. So if you've just got landscaping equipment, you don't need to do any additional calculations. But if you do have any vehicles, they will have a larger footprint, and so you need to do a test on that, and you'll need to calculate if you operate transportation vehicles, and that includes any outsourced. So even if it's your shuttle bus was operated by a different company, we do require that to be calculated and put into the spreadsheet. Refrigerants, or what again technical term is fugitive emissions. These are the gases which are used for your heating and cooling, your cooling systems. These are seen to have a higher, what we call, global warming potential than other fuels. So say, for example, if there's a leak, it's far more negative environmental impact than just, say, equivalent of CO2. So this is why we think it's important to calculate these. Clearly, if you don't have AC or chillers, you don't need to include any calculations. You do need to calculate if you have a major leak, because that will have quite a high environmental impact. If you've not had a major leak over 100 kilos, it will just add on 1% to your overall total. So 1% of your overall footprint will be uplifted, so to speak, to account for leaks which are generally, you're going to have some small leaks in the system, particularly during maintenance periods as well. So that's why that is included, but it's calculated automatically in the Excel spreadsheet. So this is the data that you've got now. So you've got all the data in about the property, all about your different fuel use, your emissions sources. Now going back to that point about allocating those emissions. Now, some hotels have what we call private space. That means it's space which is not accessible to guests or to staff, such as private apartments, private clubs, private offices, which are nothing to do with the provision of service for the hotel. So if those, come under your property, you can take them out. Now, in many cases, in properties, those areas are covered by separate meters, and so it won't affect the calculations. But if you are under the same metering and the same bills, you will need to work out the space and take those out. The key point of this is it's what's unrelated to the hotel service. So if it's back of house, it's related to the hotel service. If it's hotel offices, it's related to the hotel services. If it's a spa, even if it's operated by another company, to put your guest hat on, from the guest's point of view, that spa, if it's, accessible from the hotel, it can be considered part of the hotel. So you would need to incorporate that, but check for any separate metering in this case. What happens then is you will allocate the emissions that you've got, which are related to your service, between the guest rooms and the private, the guest rooms and the meeting space. Now you might be wondering about, the measurements. When I talked about the area of the hotel, we only looked at the meeting space and the guest room areas. We didn't say go and measure the lobby area or the restaurant area or the spa area. What about emissions from those areas? Well, they are included because you've gathered the data on it. It's just as a simple matter of allocating the emissions is we're looking for a proportion. So if your hotel is 30% meeting space and 70% guest room split, the emissions from the whole hotel, all of those services, will be divided on a 70-30 basis. I hope that's not complicated. It is quite straightforward, but the area, as I say, it's determined in order to allocate proportionately between meeting space and rooms. And the results. So, as I say, I've just given you an overview and a little bit of a taste of the Hotel Carbon Measurement Initiative here. So I've not shown you every page of the calculation tool, but certainly it is available freely on request. We'll be actually sending the methodology and the tool to everybody who has attended the webinar. And with the tool, there is actually a blank document that you can use yourself. And there's also one which is an example. So we've taken the example from the methodology and completed the spreadsheet so that you can kind of reference across and see how the calculation has been done. This is how it shows the results. So this was for Hotel H, which is our example hotel in the methodology, and it gives you a total carbon dioxide equivalent for the reporting period. So in that 1 year, Hotel H, the property carbon footprint was 1,616.64 tonnes of carbon dioxide, and that is then split between the guest rooms and the meeting rooms, as you can see. Because you've also put in data on the actual occupancy that you had over that time and the number of rooms that you've got, it will show then per occupied room on a daily basis during that reporting period was 24.2 kilos of CO2e, which is quite a respectable figure. And also per area of meeting space on an hourly basis is 110.7. So then, say for example, your corporate client works out that over the year they've spent 75 nights at your property, and they want to know the figure for that. You just put in the number of nights and the amount of meeting space occupied by the client and how long those meeting space were, and it will give you the carbon footprint. So you can go straight back to the client and say, this was your carbon footprint, and it's worked out completely proportionately. It's just a matter of filling in the orange boxes on the methodology. So a very useful and practical tool, I hope. I hope that I've not gone through too quickly. There's a few things to get your head around on this, but I think reading through the methodology and having a look at the practical guide, you'll see that it's actually fairly straightforward, and once you've done this, the benefits that you can get from doing so are great. I'd be delighted to answer any questions that you have in a minute or so. Just in the meantime, I can certainly give you some information on some of our common questions. People have asked if we collect the data, once they've calculated the footprint, what do they do with it? Well, we don't collect that data. We've created HCMI as a methodology for companies to use in the best way for them, whether it is to reply to the corporate customer, to look at their own emissions profile or so far, but it's for internal purposes. It's not for publicizing it. Because it is basically on your calculation, then if you are going to use this for significant customers, or you're going to publicize your results, it might be a good idea to get those verified just to make sure that everything has been followed correctly. So any consultant would be able to give you an independent verification and an audit of the process that you've gone through to make sure that the data is reported according to HCMI. I'll come as a last point first of all. So if you're communicating what you're doing as well, remember that the figure is not everything. It's more about what you're doing with it. If you tell the customer that your carbon footprint is 24.2 kilos per night, what does that mean much to them? I think you need to put this in some kind of context where, some people would rather say, we've calculated our carbon footprint and we're looking at means of reducing that, and that's a more positive message than a figure which doesn't really mean that much to people. And then the following year you can say you've reduced by so much, which is equivalent of taking however many cars off the road, or some other thing which will resonate with them. Because also the carbon footprints do vary. As I say, if you're in California or Connecticut, you might have quite different profiles for the energy provision. If you're a budget hotel or if you're a big casino hotel, you've got, the service provision is going to have an impact as well. So it's very difficult to be very definitive on these variations, and this is why we haven't sort of split different types of hotels we haven't normalized for this kind of thing, because it gets too difficult. You're splitting hairs in the end, and where does it stop? So we do say don't get too hung up on the figure. Start to use it to communicate, to learn, and to bring that figure down.
Fran, this is Chris. We are getting bombarded with questions pertaining to that exact topic. People want to know how they can evaluate their number, how their number compares to other hotels and similar items. So I know you've addressed that somewhat there, but is there resources where those sort of comparisons could be made?
I did see a figure recently that in the US, a good average is probably about 30 per night, 30 kilos per night per occupied room. Now it will vary, and I think it is something that we're very conscious of, and we realize that in having created HCMI that we've created an appetite for learning about this and wanting to reduce the figure. So it's very much in our mind how we can do this, how we can provide that kind of benchmark information to people without scaring them off. We're not there quite with it yet, but we will keep you informed, because it's on our mind that it would be something very useful to the hotel industry to understand, a little bit more of the position. I know that doesn't quite answer the question, unfortunately, but were there any other questions? Hi, Chris. I'm quite happy to take any other questions that you have.
Fran, this is Jeff. I don't know if Chris is having some technical difficulties, but I'll jump in and read off some questions, and
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
you can pick and choose which ones you like to respond to. Okay. Some people are asking, they might be consultants, I'm not quite sure, but they're asking how can they help with the data gathering. Maybe you could speak more towards, more generally and topically about what's the best process for going about collecting your data from a hotelier's perspective.
I think actually, from a hotelier's perspective, get the methodology, have a look at the calculation spreadsheet, and have a think about that information which is required. It is quite straightforward. It is information that most people will find quite straightforward getting the data to answer most questions. The laundry might present a little bit more difficulty. People might not have to hand, say, the area to do the area allocation. But most of these things you're going to have to sort of get once. And so it's a matter of then gathering that data in a way that's going to be helpful for you as a hotel to use again and again. So making sure that you are setting your reporting period for something which is logical to your business, depending on either your billing or your financial year or your calendar year. Something which is meaningful to you and makes it more easy to gather that data in from the bills. And so you'll see how you need to present that and how you need to gather it going forward.
Okay, great. And some people are asking about the, is there any service available that allows you to quickly compare what 30 kilos of per night per occupied room would equate to in terms of number of cars, numbers of trees saved, or are you aware of any such easily convertible metrics?
No, that's a really good question. I can't believe I've not found the answer to that already, because I think it's a great question. That's something I'd probably like to do myself. In the UK, where I'm based, the Carbon Trust is very good for that kind of information. There's a lot of resources there. So carbontrust.co.uk. I'm not quite sure if the EPA in the US has any kind of equivalent, but I'm definitely putting that on my to-do list to dig out some figures, because I think that would be great to communicate that.
Sure, and I'm actually aware the EPA does have a calculator that allows you to convert between pounds of CO2 or your metric of your choosing into a variety of alternatives to better quantify and communicate your CO2 emissions and savings.
That's great. And just a note as well, you might have been looking at the spreadsheet there and seeing that it's reporting in kilos, etc., in metric. You have the option. You can either report in metric or imperial. The important thing to do is to make sure that your measurement is consistent.
Okay, great. Well, if anybody has any last-minute questions, I'd encourage you to locate your questions box and type them in now. I'll give it a few more minutes. In the meantime, Fran, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to present to our audience, and we definitely appreciate that.
You're more than welcome, and if anybody does have any questions after that, we would be delighted to reply to answer those. I personally will be away for a couple of weeks, but my colleagues will be able to get back to you on that.
We have one last question trailing in here. What is the overall feedback from the hotel groups on HCMI? And I guess any closing thoughts, Fran?
Really, really positive, thanks. They've been pushing it out through their membership, which we actually launched it last year in June. And then this year we reissued with just a couple of refinements, which were based on feedback we'd had from users and working group members. But they've just found it's incredibly useful. It's not difficult to do, and it's really ticks that box of giving the corporate customer the information that they want. It's been very well received by the business community as well, and it's generated a lot of interest. So our priority now is to spread the word, really, make sure that anybody who has a stake in this, whether it be corporate customers, whether it be travel management companies, distribution systems, certification systems, hotel groups, other interest groups are aware of HCMI and how it can be used, and hopefully sort of encourage that uptake of it, because we really think that this is something quite unique, and we've not seen any other industry come together as the hotel industry has on this. I'm not sure that there is any voluntary standard that has as many, a similar voluntary standard that has as many people buying into. This is not ISO, but it's something which is incredibly strong, straightforward, robust, and practical, and we're very proud of it and delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you guys about it now. So
those are great points, Fran, and I'd like to just ask you to advance the deck to the contact us slide, and anybody with additional questions that maybe they didn't have a chance to type in, they might be able to reach out to us, and we can either answer it directly or reach out to Fran or a member of her staff to get the answer for you. So I'm going to close the webinar now, and thank you to all our attendees, and again, thank you to Fran for taking the time to speak to us today.
thank you.